Before we start, I just want to explain a little bit again. We will have the first 20 minutes of me asking you questions, and the last 20 minutes will be the time for audience. If we do not have like enough audience questions, I will keep asking you questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, when I was reading about your bios, I was astounded of how much you have done in your life, both of you. I think it's gonna be a very exciting conversation. But I just want to start by asking. I just want to know a little bit about you and what you're doing.
Okay. My name's Mary Ellen, and I am a retired occupational therapist. So I did that for about 30 years. I worked primarily with children with disabilities and in adult psychiatric hospital. And then since we retired, Mark and I retired about 10 years ago, we've been working with our children. They wanted to launch a business making whiskey. So you probably don't know, most people don't, but the birth of American whiskey was actually in Pittsburgh. And then we lost that whole, there were no distilleries when we opened because of Prohibition and all the depressions and recessions and problems like that. We lost whiskey making. So our children decided to bring it back. They wanted to, but do it on a more timely manner, and timely in the sense of being 2010 then, as opposed to the 1800s. So they wanted to do something that was fun and lighthearted and quirky and creative. So we make whiskey, and we make some of the original recipes. The rye whiskey is what we were known for, but we're all local, organic. We are part of the farm to table movement. And then they quickly expanded. So we make wheat whiskey also. We make gin and rum and lots of liqueurs.
Wow.
And lots, just anytime you come into the distillery, although now it's different with COVID, but you can certainly see online that you'll find 40 or 50 different kinds of products that we make. So we're very community-based. When before COVID, I ran labeling parties. All our bottles are hand labeled, and we invited community to come in and be with us. And we also invite community to come in healthier times to for fundraising. They would come and do a presentation about what sort of good work they were doing in the city, and then they would get a certain profit from the bottle sales for their organization.
Wow.
So my name is Mark, and I was a lawyer for a long time, and I still am a lawyer. And we did start this project in 2010. It was started sort of on a whim. And then since then, anytime you do a small business, at the beginning, we had to do pretty much everything when you ask, what do we do? And as we've grown, we've more defined roles. And that's a common way, obviously, that small businesses grow. One of the challenges, how do you go from when you have no employees to suddenly when you need to scale up and have a number of employees?
Wow. Wow. Sounds like I might want to know more about your whiskey company. How is the experience like from the first day compared to like now? I mean, like now it's a very different time to be, but like how did you do it? Like how did you grow your business?
Well, we started it as Mary Ellen and I said in 2010. Okay. So when we started it, we started because we were in Canada, and we were attending the Shaw Festival, and we visited some wineries, and there was one winery that we especially liked because it was family owned, and they did a very good job of telling people what they did. And so we thought on the way back from Niagara on the Lake to Pittsburgh, that wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to have a family enterprise like that and do something that was intrinsic to Western PA and that was community oriented and so on and so on. And so we, in 2010, without knowing anything at all about
Yeah.
making whiskey, I mean, literally nothing at all about making whiskey, we decided to jump right in. And when we did that, initially, there was only the 5 of us, that is family members. And then gradually, as we grew, we took on some employees. And one of the challenges at first was that in order for the business to have a chance, we needed to be able to sell directly to consumers, because the way this business is set up, you normally have to go through a distributor, and that can be very difficult because they want to, it's easier for them to simply market the national brands. And so in order to break through that, we knew we would have to change the law so we could sell directly to consumers. And we were successful in doing that. And so by being able to sell directly to consumers, then we could experiment, we could make different things. We could do things like Mary Ellen could do labeling parties with community and grow a community of our own. And from that, it just sort of took off.
Wow. So I knew that you had a law background before starting this. So did that like help you with that? Because you mentioned that you had to like deal with the law a little bit. So did that like law background like really help you with?
It was very helpful because it, as you can imagine, the making spirits, and we also make alcoholic cider. It's highly regulated, and so and you have to get a number of licenses, and so it's very good to have a technical background so you can wade through all of the different, regulations and requirements and so on and so on. And because we had this additional challenge that we wanted to change the law so that we could sell directly to consumers, it was very helpful to have some understanding of how the legislature worked, and and that sort of thing. And so it turned out, not that we planned it that way, but it turned out that it was advantageous to have that background, although it probably would have been better to have a background in chemistry.
Oh, really?
Well,
why?
Just for the distilling process. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. I mean, yeah, I think I don't know much about that, but when you say chemistry, I was like, wow, that was
right.
Not what I expect at first. Yeah. That's great to hear about that. So I want to ask Mary a little bit. When I read about your bio,
Yes.
I learned that you actually have a Bachelor of Arts in Art and Religion.
I do.
And you dream about getting an MA in therapy.
Right.
And you taught for a while in French school, and then you decide to switch to occupational therapy.
That's right.
So would you like to share with us your journey, and why did you decide to change your career?
I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to try all these things out. But when I was at Earlham, I really liked the idea of art therapy and working, especially with children in the arts, doing therapy. And so my major, the religion department, was phenomenal and very transforming. It was a great combination for me as an undergraduate. My first job out of college was at Wilmington Friends School, and I worked with 3rd to 8th graders. And I also worked with a lady, that therapist there, and we did research together. So hers was mine was the control group. My children were, quote, normal. And then she worked with children that had emotional problems. So we did similar tests, and then she used my data for her research so it gave me a chance to see what she was doing, but it also, and how an art therapist might work. But what I realized at the time was that art therapy was very limited in the kind of jobs there were. And I was going to have to put myself through, it was a very practical decision. I couldn't afford to get, at the time there were just 4 art therapy programs in the country, and they were all at very expensive schools.
Yeah.
So I would have had to put myself through graduate school, and then for a fairly uncertain job market. So, but in the meantime, I got married that spring. So Mark and I got married, and I moved to St. Louis, and I was really lucky. I worked as a kindergarten teacher in a private school there, and was able to continue to use art a lot in my programs. But also the mother of one of my children was an occupational therapist. And Mark was at school at Washington University, and she was an OT at Washington University, and told me all about OT, and said really anything you wanted to do as an art therapist, you really could do as an OT. OT is a combination of the arts and psychology and science. So it was a little bit bigger medical model. And then when we moved to Michigan, we were lucky, I was lucky. I was able to get, at the time, there were only 10 master's OT programs in the country, and one of them was in Kalamazoo. So I got a master's degree there.
Wow. And so do you think that you make a great decision?
Oh, to go into OT?
Yes.
To switch? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't done that other route. You know, all the decisions, like going to Earlham and studying what I did, and having the opportunity to work in the arts in Delaware and apply it with children in St. Louis, and then to be able to get into graduate school. It was a refining process all the way through. But for me, it was, you know, I feel very fortunate, and we moved a lot, and it allowed me, occupational therapy, at least at the time, it was a very versatile profession, and everywhere we moved, I was able to get jobs or make my own job. So it was a practical decision too.
Yeah. And how do you see the occupational therapy field now compared to when you first started?
It's, you know what, it's like a lot of other occupations now. It's taken on the more medical model, the more corporate model.
Okay.
And for example, when I finished, there were no OT schools in Pittsburgh. So you really wrote your own program. You could design your own job. And now you really have to pick and choose, you know, what school you want to go to. Because, for example, in Pittsburgh, I'll just use that as an example. If you go to University of Pittsburgh, you'll be at the top of the class as far as getting a job at the hospitals that are UPMC here, University of Pittsburgh hospitals. So it's, but on the other hand, I see it's always been a really exciting field. And I guess what I've always loved about OT, I've just never met an OT I didn't like. We share the same values. It's a very holistic approach to treating people. And whether you're working with children or adults or the elderly or in psych hospitals or with physical disabilities, there's a real emphasis on the whole person. That's really exciting. And what I've found is too, that over time, a lot of things have gotten bigger and better. There are a lot more specialties in OT. So you can decide, for example, to be a hand therapist or to work, just on the shoulder, or there are many subspecialties now that, so I always encourage people, if they're interested, it's a really good field.
Wow. Yeah. I heard about occupational therapy a little bit, but thank you so much for sharing
Oh, sure.
that with us. That was very helpful for me personally too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I would like to talk to Mark as well. So
Sure.
I would want to ask you a few questions. And I know that you were in law. And how did you make the decision to go into law? And yeah, tell me a little bit about your job and daily responsibilities, I guess.
Yeah, I decided in my really junior, senior year of Earlham that I would go to law school. And part of it was, to be honest, because I didn't have any other clear career path I was thinking of, and this seemed like a something that would give me opportunities to do a variety of things. And Earlham at that time we were very fortunate because they had a excuse me, what was called a tied scholarship program with Washington University, so that a student nominated by Earlham could get a tuition scholarship to WashU. And so there were a couple of people who were ahead of me. They didn't want to go to WashU. I wanted to go to WashU. And so I got a tied scholarship. So I'm very thankful for Earlham and WashU that they had that arrangement. It doesn't exist now. That was sort of in the day when law schools were trying to attract students, and that, after my year, they didn't really need to do that because there was an overwhelming number of people going to law school. So when I went to law school and I graduated, I didn't really want to do the traditional path. And so we went to a small town in Michigan, Albion, a college town. And I worked with a lawyer there, but I didn't really like it very much. It was a general practice. But I met a legal services attorney who was working in town. And I really liked the work he was doing, and I liked him. And because of that relationship, I eventually found my way into doing some legal services work, and I really enjoyed that. I still have lifelong friends from that period of time in my life. And eventually, I then worked for a program with the United Auto Workers, representing auto workers in various types of cases. And finally, when we came to Pittsburgh, I worked for a firm that specialized in doing trial law, representing workers who were exposed to various types of occupational exposures. So they had diseases, and so that was very meaningful and fulfilling. And so I did a lot of trial work throughout the state and in different states in the country. Yeah, so that was sort of my journey. And
wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, the thing about law is it does give you a lot of opportunities to different ways you can use it. And if you don't want to become a traditional lawyer, there are other ways of using your law degree. And it just depends whether you like it and you want to go to law school for 3 years.
So, do you like your job?
You mean when I was a lawyer, or
yes.
now, or both? Yeah, it really, like any job, it has its ups and downs. And if you're involved in doing, what litigation or trial work like I was, it can be very demanding because there are a lot of time pressures, and your schedule is determined by the courts, and you have it can be a very stressful existence, and people win and they lose, and so it's not for everybody. A lot of people like doing what's called transactional law, where you're basically advising your clients. You're doing legal analysis, and so you're not really doing a lot of litigation. And so those are two very distinct paths that people take. Do they want to be go into litigation and do trial work, or do they want to be more of a, counselors and do legal analysis and advise clients and sort of help them work through the maze of, regulatory work and all that sort of thing. So that's a big choice if you're going to be a lawyer. Which kind of law do you want to do?
Yeah. So is there how do I frame this question? So is there a sector in law that is more demanding than other? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it really depends on what your cup of tea is. And so there, like in any profession, there are arms of the profession that are just inherently, I think, have more pressure. For example, if you're in medicine,
yeah,
I would find it very difficult to be a surgeon. That seems to me to be incredibly pressured. But people who are surgeons, it's fine with them. And it's in the same way in law, people would find it very difficult to do litigation and trial work because it can be very pressuring, and people have to, people win and people lose. And that's, that may be hard for some people. It may not be. But at the same time, if you're working for a large corporate firm and you're doing some complicated business transaction, you're under a lot of pressure, and there's always time constraints. And so in law, it's really, like in anything, I think, in any career, it's really a matter of how do you find the balance between your professional life and your personal life. And it's always a challenge, always a challenge.
I completely agree with that. At this point, I would like to ask the audience if you would like to ask Mark and Mary any questions. If not, I can definitely continue our conversation.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Sure.
Hi. I graduated in 2019, so a pretty recent graduate. I was a geology major, and I'm currently working as a geologist in Indianapolis. So I was interested in talking to you guys because I'm very much into craft beer, and I brew my own beer. And so it's sort of been like a dream of mine to open my own craft brewery. And I could see some parallels between what you guys do and what I want to do. So I just had some questions about starting your own small business. What was that like in the beginning? Because it's something I want to do, but also it seems like something that's very risky financially, and just, what was that like? Was there any point in the beginning that you were like, oh, I don't know if we're going to make it as a business? And how was that like?
It's at the beginning, it's very much of a roller coaster, and it's very up and down. In fact, I remember having a conversation with somebody who started the first microbrewery in Pittsburgh, and I asked him. I said, Scott, is there ever a time like at night when you wake up and you say, why did I do this? And he said, pretty much every night. But so it's, when you're starting out, we had the advantage that we had savings. So we had money to work with. That's incredibly important. It's also incredibly important to have a passion. That'll just get you so far, though, because the day-to-day work becomes very much day-to-day work. And it's very good. Marketing is incredibly important. And so being able to have a story, and we had a very good story because we were talking about bringing whiskey back to Western Pennsylvania. We could tie into George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, and there was a whiskey rebellion. And so we had a great story. It was very much part of the Western Pennsylvania history. And so people took to the story. it's almost that the marketing, especially in craft breweries, because there's so many now, we have so many in Pittsburgh, the marketing becomes more important than your product. Your product's incredibly important. You have to have good beer, people won't drink it, but you need to be able to tell the story and to tell it well. And so that's really what's hard, is because you're trying to get your business off the ground. You have to figure out, how am I going to produce the beer? You know, you've got all these technical problems you've got to answer. You've got to have money to keep you going for a while. And then you've got to find the time to market your beer. And the way people do it, if you're good at navigating the social media world, that's great. Our daughter worked as she was had a master's in business, and she was marketing for Heinz, you know, the big food company. So when she joined us, she was tremendous. She really did a great job. We got so much free publicity because we were early on. We were the first distillery in Pittsburgh. So that the free publicity was incredibly important. We didn't spend a dime on advertising for 7 years or so. It was all free advertising. But you've got to attend a lot of events to get your name out there. You've got to build up your community. And Mary Ellen was very good at that. And our son Eric, because you go out and you would, build up community of people. We did labeling parties that developed a community of people. And so that's really the hardest thing, I think, is the marketing. Is how do you break through the noise so you can sustain your enterprise? And with craft breweries, it's very, very hard because there's so many of them now. There's more of a obstacles to entry when you're doing spirits because it's very regulatory. You've got to figure out a way. If you're like making spirits, you got to age them. So how do you sustain your business while you're aging them? With beer, you don't have to do that. So you can immediately start selling your product, which is great. The way a lot of local breweries here, what sustains them certainly, and a lot of them don't even move beyond this. They'll sell growlers. It's all on site, but I think that's, to me, that's I think the single biggest challenge is how do you break through the noise of all of the many craft breweries and make yourself unique. That's really the issue. How do you make yourself unique? Especially if you're going to do it in a place, if you're doing it in a smaller place where there aren't a lot of craft breweries, different story. But
where are you?
Yeah, we're
right now.
Where? Indianapolis. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, well, good. Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing, though. I think it's really interesting, you're a geology major, and one of the reasons we have several geologists that have become good friends and are real interested in our products, and our kids have done all these terroir studies, and I don't know if you could apply that to beer or not, but that is for whiskey. It's like terroir and wine, where you source your products. So we actually did rye is our mainstay whiskey. So we had rye grain from the area, but we also got rye from Minneapolis and rye from Saskatchewan, Canada. So just to see terroir, how does that influence the taste? But I would think, like maybe with water and different things, like you could do some interesting studies too that might be really interesting as a geologist. I could see you adding a lot to the profession that way.
One of the things that a lot of the craft breweries in Pittsburgh are doing is that because their on-site sales are so important, and they need to bring people into their brewery. A lot of them now are doing food, and that adds an additional complexity. But they almost feel they need to do that in order to bring people in, because it's so hard, to distribute beer through a wholesaler, and that if you can, the more you can sell directly, the more you can control your own destiny. We knew early on that if we had to rely upon distributors, it would be very, very difficult. And so our entire business, there's two business models like with distilleries. One is you're basically just producing something and then you're going to sell it through distributors. And that's how the big distilleries do it. The second business model that we followed, it's all based upon on-site direct sales and events. So events are huge. So we have events all the time, both on-site and we do events throughout the community. That's the model we chose. That's more complicated in the sense that you need to have people who can do the events. You need to have people, at your site. It's more fulfilling because you have much more contact with the community. But it does get more complicated. So I think that, if I was starting a craft brewery, number one, I'd want to make sure that I made good beer, because people will recognize that. Two, I'd really want to study the local market. How many breweries are there? Talk to people. People are, in that. If you have done any of this, you'll know that the brewers are pretty open with information. They love to talk about what they're doing, and they won't have any problem unless they're really busy. But they'll be happy to talk with about what they're doing and how it's going and that sort of thing. But then you really have to work on your story. What makes you unique? That is so important, and it's and we were lucky that our timing was right, and we had sort of a natural story, and that really, really helps.
Yeah, thanks for all that. It's very, very useful.
Yeah.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, at the beginning, you've got to be willing to do everything. You're everything. You're the beer maker, you're the janitor, you're the person who makes the sale. It's just the way it is.
But keep in touch if you can. We're glad to share our emails with you if you have other questions. Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, also, I've actually heard of Wiggle whiskey before, but I didn't realize that it was made by Earlham alums.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we've had a lot of Earlham events at Wiggle. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. We probably know some of the same people because we know people in Indianapolis too. Yeah. Yeah, best wishes.
Yeah, good luck to you. We've had a number of geologists who've worked for us.
Yeah.
In different
Wow.
capacities. Yeah.
Do you accept biologists?
Huh?
Oh yeah.
Do you accept biologists?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had all the different sciences. There's a natural affinity because of the distilling process. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I can join then.
Yeah.
You can, that's right.
Yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So if no one else having a question, I would like to continue the conversation. And if you want to ask, you can just interrupt me and ask a question later.
I'm just gonna hop off now, but thank you guys so much. It was nice to meet you guys.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
so
you.
nice to meet you as well.
Good meeting
Keep in
you.
touch.
All right, bye.
Good luck.
Bye.
So I would like to ask that how did the education at Earlham kind of help you with your career, and did you feel like what you were doing now would be like helpful because of what you did from Earlham?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, then I'll let Mary Ellen
Sure.
give her insight. I think let's take what we're doing now. I think that, on one level, it seems very odd that two graduates of Earlham would have a distillery, would be operating a distillery.
Yeah.
But what motivated at least me to do it is very much part of the Earlham ethos. And number one, we wanted to do something that was a high quality product. We wanted to do something that was made from regional ingredients. We wanted to be able to work with local people, including local farmers. All of our grain, for example, comes from local farmers. So that was very part of a community ethic. And then finally, we really wanted to do something with the community. We didn't want to just produce a product in a warehouse and not be part of the community. So the whole community ethos was part of what we did. And that's very much part of what Earlham is about. And I think that's one of the challenges for people who want to start a small business is how do you make it socially responsive? How do you make it part of the community? And we viewed that as a challenge and as part of the mission. And we have really become part of the fabric of the community. And that's been very meaningful. And one of the things that we do, as Mary Ellen was explaining earlier, is last year we hosted about 101 nights where nonprofits could come in and they use our facilities for free. And then they can have events and raise money for the nonprofit. And so we really enjoy that partnership. And so we've tried to make the distillery, try to give it some value to the community. And the other thing that I like about it is that it's very appealing to, younger people, people between the age of 22 and late 30s, early 40s. That's really the niche that we market to, and that finds it interesting. And the other thing that we did early on, as Mary Ellen was talking about, is we were trying to make this more something that appealed to a wider segment of people, and especially women. Women had never been sort of part of the whole spirits world, and that's changing. And we wanted to do it in a responsible way. And so that, again, I think is very much part of the Earlham ethos, even though it does seem, I remember having a Earlham event at at the distillery, and we had a bunch of Earlham alumni there. One of the people stood up and he said, "Doesn't it seem strange they're having this Earlham event in the middle of a distillery?" Nobody seemed to mind. Okay, Marilla, go ahead.
So, yeah, interesting. In my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have imagined 20 years ago be doing this at this point in my life, but I've really loved it. And I see it as all those other things, starting with Earlham, leading up to it. I mean, Earlham opened me up to the fact that, life was really about community and service. I be allowed to fine tune how I wanted to be a part of that. But, I feel like with every career change I've had, with every new job I've had, you're always stepping into the unknown. It's a new environment, it's a new set of expectations, but it's real. It's really a real part of what the world is. And I've found that with having the distillery, it's like that. I have, until this COVID thing came up, I was every day pretty much in the distillery, 7 days a week. And so you never knew who was going to come in. So we have people come from really all over the world. I never knew whiskey was such a, passion for some people, and that they were so motivated. And then I meet fellow OTs, I meet fellow Earlhamites, I meet people from really all walks of life, bowling leagues, whatever, the Harvard Princeton Club, they all come like whiskey. But I really like that the cultural aspect of it as well, that we bring, just by being who we are, we bring the history of this region that goes back to the 1700s, when whiskey making started right here, and the Whiskey Rebellion happened. That was so significant in our history. Wow. And it's a tradition that we've kept up. But I have appreciated the fact that we attract a really eclectic group of people. We attract as many teachers and librarians and social workers as we do doctors and engineers and chemists and scientists. So it's been really fun, and our workers reflect that too. We have a very dynamic group of workers who are very well educated, and it's part of their training. They're all trained to give tours of the facility and the history, and so it's been a very exciting place to work, and we like the challenge. We like I can be in the tasting room one day. A professor came in with 25 students from Chatham, from the food studies program. They have a master's degree, and he said, "Do you mind if we, you did this last year, and I didn't have time to call you ahead of time, but would you talk a little bit about what you do and give them a little tour?" And it was Monday. It was a quiet day, so we were able to accommodate that. So it's like I said, every day is a little different. You never quite know what's
Wow.
going to happen.
Yeah, but I do think that, I mean, to put even a finer point on your question, that, I think one of the big issues in our country right now is the fact that the communal aspect of the country is being torn asunder in a lot of different ways. And I think anything that you can do to build up that community, and you can use the vehicle can be almost anything. Our vehicle right now happens to be a whiskey distillery, okay?
Yeah.
But anything you can do, I think, towards that end is good. And I think that Earlham, that really grew out of my experience at Earlham, that sort of instinct to do that. And so I'm glad that I had that opportunity at Earlham to do that. And I do think that, all the stuff you hear about liberal arts, and it gives you a broader view of things and allows you to be maybe more flexible. I think that is true. You're able to, if you're starting out on your own project, if you're doing some entrepreneurial, you discover very quickly that the chief skill you need to have is to be able to problem solve. We knew nothing about making whiskey, so what we had to do, we had to find information, we had to find people, and we had to be willing to fail. And we had to try to bring that together. That's very much of a broader liberal arts focus than a narrow technical focus. And so you just have to be able to solve problems outside of your comfort zone in order to launch an enterprise like that.
That's a great answer. And I think that applies to a lot of things that we do in life too.
Yeah,
And thank you so much for that. So, I mean, talk about that. So how are you dealing with the current situation right now, as well as how do you deal with managing your business through hard times? I heard that in like those times, a lot of business are being damaged a lot, and I wonder if like you are having the same experience, and how do you respond to this?
Okay, so we're in somewhat of a unique situation in the sense that because what happened in Pennsylvania is that the governor allowed us to stay open, not to have people come into our restaurant or store, but we were able to sell to people online because the governor closed the state stores. Pennsylvania is a state in which spirits and wine are sold through state stores.
Yeah.
He closed them.
Yeah.
He closed those. And so that allowed us to sell online. Now, in order to do that, we had to change on a dime our business model, but we were able to do that. And so right now we're doing fine because we're selling things online. Now, we're going to have a very difficult time when we reopen because we have a number of different restaurants. And the question will be, how do we make those places safe and secure and make people feel comfortable, both our staff and the customers feel, and those are challenges that we have not yet worked through, but we're going to have to work through. and we're talking about how do you do that? How do you make a restaurant environment today comfortable for people? And we don't know yet. We'll have to experiment and see what we come up with.
That is true. Well, it's 5:28, so now is the time for general audience questions. But I don't know if there's anyone staying with us until now. So I just want to say that thank you so much, Mark and Mary. It was such a learning experience for all of us to know about you and what you do, and your work has been your story has been very inspiring, and I think that anyone who happens to listen to this recording will benefit a lot from this.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
It was really
we enjoyed it very
enjoyable.
much.
Thank you a lot.
Good luck to you. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Keep in touch.
Okay.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Come see us when this is over.
Yeah, I will come to Pittsburgh one time.
Where are you from, by the way?
Country.
Yeah.
I'm from Vietnam.
Okay.
Are you? Oh my.
Yeah, a long flight.
Are you gonna go back to Vietnam or stay in the country?
At some point, yeah, okay. I will.
Okay.
But I come here to study, and was lucky to go through 4 years here. And what you talk about the experience, Earlham, I agree with a lot. Earlham changed my life. Honestly.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Love hearing that.
We're glad we got to meet you.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope to keep in touch with you.
Okay.
Oh, please
Okay.
do.
Okay.
Thanks, Cole.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.